How y'all doing? For this review, I'm going to go review a classic that has been adapted to film and such over the years. It dates back to 1785, and most of you are probably familiar with this from an adaptation of a Terry Gilliam film from the late 80s. It is Surprising Adventures of Baron Munchausen by Rudolf Erich Raspe, and it is illustrated by Gustave Dore, a very famous illustrator who you've probably seen throughout various classic literature. So what is this about? Well, it's about the exploits of Baron Munchausen in various forms through his travels, from known lands to exotic lands, his hunting trips. He has these very outrageous stories that you can't take seriously, but they're just fun to listen to. And I would you trying to cover every story in this is pretty much impossible for the length of this video. Not to mention give away too many spoilers. This is less than 200 pages. Or I should say just about 200 pages. But as each chapter is just one story right after the other of his exploits. So let's explore what they're about. Since there's so many little stories throughout this book, I'm going to pick out some of the samples. Some of these are the highlights that many of you are familiar with through other adaptations. So for one, it starts off earlier with the Baron Munchausen traveling to Russia in a very deep of winter, and through and then one night during the middle of the night he decides to take a rest on top of the snow. But he finds this little metal rod on the ground, so he ties his horse onto that, and he sleeps a little bit further away from the horse. Sounds pretty ordinary, except throughout the night the snow melts, and apparently the snow is packed very deep because Baron wakes up on the ground level, lower than what he was, because his horse is that little metal rod is actually the top of a church steeple, and so it's just hanging there while the Baron is on the ground, just looking up and seeing this his horse hanging there. And that's just how these stories go. He just talks about one weird event after another. So he also talks about some of the people he meets. One of them is a man who, during his fight from the Turks, has had his head shot off. So he's got a hole on top of his head, and Baron is trying. Also notices that every time he drinks heavily, he does get drunk, and somehow he finds the relationship on top of that. Then we get to his hunting exploits. Now, many of these you might not like the description of these, but they're so cartoonish you shouldn't take them all too disgusted by this. One of the ones that I liked was he was going out duck hunting, and he finds these ducks, and he takes this piece of fatty liver that he carried around with him and tied to a string. So he throws it out there, and one duck eats it, and it was so oily it went through the duck, came out of the duck at the other end, and another duck eats it, and then another one, and then another one, and another one. So he has a string of ducks, like a string of pearls, that he is attached to the string, which Baron has, and then the ducks start flying away all at once, carrying the Baron with him. So he's flying through the air, and he tries to guide where he wants to go by flapping his coat wings until he finally drops from there. So again, another it's just stories like this that just throughout that it's ridiculously fun here. Oh, another one where he fires a spike at a black fox. It has such fine fur. He didn't want to put a hole in it for the bullet, so instead he takes a spike in his gun instead, fires it, and it nails the tail of the black fox to a tree, and he whips it to where it jumps out of his skin, so it preserved the fur. Another one is where he tries to shoot a deer, which he comes across, but he didn't have he ran out of shot, so he takes a cherry seed and puts it in his gun, shoots it on top of its head, but it runs away. Later, he finds that very same deer. How does he know? Because there's a cherry tree on top of its head through the two antlers. So, very interesting there. Another, the tale involves his horse, Bucephalus. He talks a story about how he acquired Bucephalus, and then how he uses it to fight for the Russians against the Turks. And one day he was being trying to rush towards this gate, and he rushes as fast as he can while the gate is closing, and Baron just makes it, or at least he thinks he does, because as he takes his horse to drink, the horse is drinking, and then he hears a sound behind him, and he looks behind him as the water's coming out of the half of his horse. It was cut off by the gate. Don't worry, the horse is fine. They sewed it back with sprigs and shoots, and until it got better again. On one of the Baron's trips to the moon, yes, one of his trips, involved when one time he was a prisoner of war to the Sultan of Turks while he was fighting for the Russians. Well, the Sultan made him in charge of his beehives, so as he was herding the bees up to the flowers there, one of the bees was attacked by two bears. Well, using his silver hatchet to try to attack the bears, he accidentally throws it upward and it lands on the moon. Well, how's he going to get back? Well, he takes some turkey beans and plants them onto the ground, and it shoots up very fast and tall enough to reach one of the horns of the moon. The Baron climbs up there, and very hard to find the silver axe, but eventually he did, being silver axe and the moon being silver and everything. But he did find his axe, and the turkey beans dried up, so it's no use to him now. So how's he going to get back down? Well, he takes some, shafts and wheat shafts or something similar lines of the moon there, and he makes his own rope. So and he and tries hooks down to the horns of the moon, and so he climbs down, but there's not enough rope there. So what does he do? He cuts from the top and ties it to the bottom. He does this a few times, but the more he keeps doing that, the rope has less integrity. So eventually it falls and he hits the ground 9 fathoms, making a hole 9 fathoms deep. He still got a problem with the bear, so what does he do? Well, with one of the bears, he takes a wagon pole, and then still attached to the wagon, and he coats it with honey, and then the bear starts eating the wagon pole, and eventually he goes so far deep it comes out the other end, and Baron just stuck in a piece of wood, trapping the bear on the wagon pole. So that's how he solves that issue. Let's not forget one of his famous exploits is when he was at a war. He got too close to a cannon, which fired, and now he's carrying the Baron on top of this, who's riding this cannonball all the way across to his enemy. About halfway through, he started reflecting that if he actually makes it to the other side, they'll declare him a spy and hang him on the first tree. You got to think about these things in such situations. So he sees another cannonball coming by, the opposite direction. So he jumps onto that and flies back to his friends, safe and sound. Didn't really accomplish his mission there, but he was safe. Of course, another time, the Baron was riding his horse, Bucephalus, and then, as he tried to cross a lake, it was a little deeper than what he thought. So when it was up to his neck, but that's okay. Well, even though he had no one to help him out here, he was able to pull himself out by pulling on his own pigtail up to his back and gripping the horse with his legs. He was able to lift him and the horse right out of the lake, safe and sound. Another time, the Baron was being chased by this lion down the beach, and the lion almost got him, but the Baron ducked, and the lion leaped, but he gave so much force, he leaped over the Baron and into the mouth of a crocodile, and got lodged in down its throat. So the Baron took his cutlass and cut the lion's head, cut the lion's head off, and then he forced the head, using the butt of his musket there, he forced the lion's head down the crocodile's throat, and choked the crocodile, so he was safe from both of them. Another story involves a Baron going out for swimming in the Mediterranean, where he was swallowed by a giant fish. The fish was large enough to where if he bunched himself up, it swallowed him. And he tries to get out first by kicking and rolling around the fish to upset it to where you would spit him out. No dice. Later on, as he was still inside, it was a big rumbling of the fish, and he was finally it turns out that the fish was captured by an Italian vessel, and while discussing on how to cut it to get the best oil out, the Baron tries to position himself and starts talking, and hearing now this fish is having a human voice, the Baron pops out of it and thankful for his rescue. Then there was the adventure of how the Baron ended up with the Sultan of Turkey's great treasure. You see, on his adventures, the Baron meets some very peculiar individuals. A man with great strength, a man with very strong winds, that could blow, windmills. That's how he found him. He was able to find a guy who had an incredible amount of hearing. He knew guys who could shoot across the world with accuracy. He has also a man who had chains on his legs that will slow him down. So, with this retinue, he goes around his travels, and after some adventures, he finds himself to the Sultan of Turkey. Now, the Sultan takes him in and invites him to his seraglio, and they were discussing, he was offering him a bottle of Tokay. Now, you see, even though they're Muslim and they're not allowed to drink, they do drink in secret, but the thing is, they don't know what's the best around. So, the Sultan offers him Tokay, and he, the Baron tells him, this is not good quality Tokay. I can tell you where good Tokay is. Give me a chance to send one of my men to the Empress of Austria, and she will give a bottle for Tokay, right at 4 o'clock. Now, the Sultan doesn't like being tricked, so he makes a wager with the Baron here. He says, "Okay, I'll tell you what. If this doesn't happen by 4 o'clock, I will get to cut off your head. But if you can bring in a bottle of Tokay to us at that time, you may take as much from the treasury as you can. The strongest man can carry it." The wager's on. So he sends the man with the balls and chains. It takes him off, and off he goes. With a letter from the Baron to the Empress to get a bottle of Tokay. Time is running short. What's going on? He should be back, after, with plenty of time to spare. Unfortunately, they discovered through his other companions that the man who could run very fast is asleep underneath a tree. The sharpshooter shoots to that tree and shoots an apple and drops it on his head, and it wakes him up. He grabs the ball and reads it and meets back with the Sultan just in time. Okay, so the Baron won the wager, and so the Sultan says, "Grab what you can," and so he did. And the strongest man in his retinue was able to carry every bit of treasure from that, causing the Sultan to get very upset when he found out about it, because they didn't expect that to happen. So he sends out his armada to go out against him, only to be blown back by one of his companions with a very strong breath. The Baron later talks about his second trip to the moon. This time he was on a ship that a hurricane swept up and actually made him land on it, where he talks about the inhabitants. Everything's gigantic on the moon there. There's giant three-headed birds, three-headed giraffe. The flies are huge. The inhabitants, the natives there, are able to take off their own heads. They are able to use the three-headed birds as steeds and shoot either asparagus or horseradish sticks, whichever is in season at the time. And he talks about the activities of the Moon Men and so forth. What can I say? He goes on many wild adventures. There was also a time where the Baron Munchausen went up Mount Etna. As he climbed up there, he fell down, and as he fell down, the vapors burned him and everything. And he finds that in the bottom of it he meets the god Vulcan and later his wife Venus. You see, what it is that Mount Etna is one of Vulcan's furnaces and forges. And usually the eruptions occurs when Vulcan starts getting fights with the inhabitants that work on the forges and all that. See, he throws fiery rocks at them, which they are so good at deflecting, and shoots his way upward. That's where the eruptions occur. It can last for many months. That explains why Mount Etna is so active. Of course, Vulcan takes him into a nice room, treats his wounds, gives him good hospitality, meets his beautiful wife Venus, and unfortunately through the scandal mongers there, incited anger in Vulcan about the Baron and Venus, so he takes him down to a well and throws him in. And this takes him, Baron, through the well and all the way to the other side of the world, where he was picked up by a Dutch ship. So that's just a fraction of the many adventures of Baron Munchausen. I didn't cover about half of it because it's almost non-stop. And it's amazing how this book, which is just less than 200 pages, illustrated, covers so much of the exploits of the Great Baron. Now, what's interesting about this story is, or just as fascinating as the book itself, is the biography of Rudolf Erich Rast, and I'm going to read to you in the back of this book. Sorry if I don't read too well, but just to find out, let's see. Rudolf Erich Rast, I'm not even sure if I'm pronouncing that right, was born in Hanover, Germany in 1736. He studied in Leipzig and Göttingen, sorry if I'm pronouncing that, universities, and afterwards worked as a librarian before becoming a professor in Kassel. He wrote books and essays on all sorts of subjects, zoology, geology, literature, and philosophy, and he also was a keeper of antique gems and medals belonging to the local ruler, the Landgrave of Hesse. In 1771, he married Elizabeth Lang, daughter of a Berlin doctor, with whom he had 2 children. Unfortunately, Rast's lifestyle was extravagant, and his career came to an end in 1775 when he was discovered to have been selling off objects in the Landgrave's collection to line his own pockets. He fled to London, escaping from police custody in the Harz Mountains on the way. While unflattering advertisements were put out for the arrest of Constable Rast, a long-faced man with small eyes, crooked nose, red hair under his stumpy periwig, and a jerky gait. His wife divorced him. The Royal Society expelled him. The author Horace Walpole befriended him, helped him publish an essay on the origins of oil painting, and bailed him out of gaol when he was arrested for debt by his tailor. In 1782, the manufacturer Matthew Bolton employed him in Cornwall as a mining engineer and possibly an industrial spy. It was in Cornwall, still hard up, that Rast wrote the book originally known as Baron Munchausen's narrative of his marvelous travels and campaigns in Russia. He based his hero on a real-life model called Frederick Hieronymus. Freiherr von Munchausen, 1720-97, a German aristocrat well known for telling tall stories about his colorful sporting and military career. He was, who was said to have been none too pleased by his depictions in print as the Lying Baron. The book was published anonymously in London in 1785. Far from making the author's fortune, he fell rather flat, and after 2 editions, he sold the copyright to a canny bookseller who employed a team of hack writers to add more stories to it. Sales were excellent, and Baron Munchausen's adventures have remained popular ever since. Rast wrote in English and missed another trick by leaving the poet Gottfried August Berger to translate the tales into German, and Berger made a great success of it, and for many years was thought to be the author. In 1787, Rast was in Edinburgh, still penniless, but moving once more in intellectual circles. In 1791, he published a catalogue of ancient and modern gems in European collections. He then went prospecting for mineral ores in the Highlands and conveniently discovered some on the estate of his patron, Sir John Sinclair. Unsurprisingly, since he put them there himself. When this was discovered, Rast swiftly took himself off to Ireland, where, in a copper mine in Muckross in Kerry, he died of scarlet fever in 1794. Sorry I didn't read that too well, but the author himself was interesting because he was a guy who had it pretty well, and through dishonest means, he kind of fell down his luck of ups and downs. It's kind of like the person who wins the lottery and gets arrested for trying to sell drugs. That's happened there. But it's funny because the story we read here was not originally done by the guy. It was modified later on when he sold the copyright. So I just find that interesting. Of course, as I said, Gustave Dore has done all the illustrations for Baron Munchausen, and it is littered throughout the book in various forms. You can tell by the slideshow I used several of them, and it just adds to the wonderful zaniness and entertaining value that the stories present in just the right way. If you don't know who Gustave Dore is, he was a famous illustrator of that time. He has illustrated some of the most popular works at the time: Three Musketeers, Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven, The Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. He's done biblical illustrations, of course, and he's also done Milton's Paradise Lost, Cervantes of Don Quixote. He's illustrated that. I have a copy of Dante Alighieri's The Divine Comedy, where he does all illustrations of that. If you look up Gustave Dore, he is a phenomenal artist of his time. He was one of the highest paying artists of his day, and is definitely worth checking out. So, but it is, while it's not it's not his most extravagant work, it does complement the stories, that is shown here, in the oddballness and all that. Of course, Baron Munchausen has been adapted multiple times, mostly in foreign films. There is a cartoon adaptation I found where it has a wonderful old. One of them was called Moon Madness, which I didn't care much for the animation on that one, but it is the exploits of the Baron going to the moon and adventures on that. Not exactly from the book, but it does illustrate the giant flies, the people who take their heads off and everything. But there was this one where it's a short 7-minute cartoon, is either Russian or something like that. It has that wonderful old MGM style animation and everything, and it definitely is. It shows you how fun Baron Munchausen's stories are. Most of us here in America are familiar with the Terry Gilliam film from 1989, The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, an all-star cast, John Neville, Eric Idle, Uma Thurman, Polly Walker, and all sorts. And it doesn't tell, it shows its own story and integrating many of the exploits, some of which I mentioned here, about the Baron's trip to the moon, how he got down by cutting the rope from the top and so forth, how he meets Vulcan and Venus, how he gets swallowed by a fish and all that. It does, many of us are familiar with that, but it's always good to see where it all came from through the original story by Rasp. So, Adventures of Baron Munchausen. It's a children's book, but it's a quickly read book. I donated plasma and just started reading this, and I already got through a quarter of the book just in that time. It reads very, very fast. And if you like these old-fashioned stories where, that ranks up there with The Wizard of Oz and Alice in Wonderland, this is a great one that complements that. And I would say that, some of you are kind of sensitive to how he treats the animals that he goes on the hunting exploits there. If that bothers you, toughen up, will you? I mean, the level of violence he has on these is the same. It ranks right up there to old Warner Brother cartoons and stuff like that. And in fact, some of the way those old cartoons are from Warner Brothers and all of them, I can see where this is an influence on that style of comedy. And it just shows that you can, you don't take it seriously. It's a lot of fun. So the Surprising Adventures of Baron Munchausen by Rudolf Erich Rasp, illustrated by Gustave Dore. Check it out. I mean, it was just wonderful, and I'm glad I got it at Dead. Thank you all for watching. You have a nice day.